it's, I mean, it's Easter morning, right? And so in some sense to talk a little bit about this is appropriate, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I came to University of Illinois, where you and I met, you know, in the 80s, I was just deeply marinated in not just Christianity, but fundamentalist Christianity. And it was like it was like being in a straitjacket and not knowing it, in a sense.
Yeah.
And yet I had this complication in that I had read On the Road by Kerouac. I had been in the Lower East Side just, you know, months before I showed up. And so I was this kind of a walking contradiction of all these things that were, you know, kind of bumping into each other. And yet, you know, I knew that Allen Ginsberg loved William Blake. And William Blake was very, you know, a mystic, but a devoted Christian. So I knew there was some way to reckon. And Kerouac himself, you know, killed himself with alcohol, but also deeply Catholic in some kind of failed Buddhist way. And so I'm still kind of wrestling with that stuff, I think, which is probably a good wrestling match, because if you're not wrestling, then you're just kind of, you know, going along on some kind of automatic pilot of self-righteousness and arrogance. I mean, you become a monster.
Okay. I wouldn't go that far, but it's one way to look at it.
I'll probably edit that out.
I don't know if it affected you, but I felt like the photo of the black hole was pretty spiritual.
The photo of a black hole?
Yeah, you know, that came out last week.
I didn't see it. How did this affect you?
Are you living in a cave over there?
Yeah, I am literally.
They photographed a black hole, you know, and all this time it's been theoretical.
Oh. Yeah.
I mean, they were pretty sure, you know, that it existed, that black holes exist, but it's based on Einstein's theories, and Einstein didn't really like the idea that they were black holes.
Right, I don't either.
He came up with it. And other people have been working on it and sort of have been even more sure. Yes, there's black holes.
Yeah.
And this one physicist, I forgot his name, but he decided to organize all the telescopes in the world.
Yeah.
To focus like on this one spot, actually two spots.
Okay.
Trying to photograph where they thought there were two different black holes in different like solar systems, I guess.
Yeah.
And so essentially it was an Earth-sized telescope.
Wow. Okay.
And it took them 2 years just to process the data and come up with this photo.
Yeah.
And it was almost like you were looking at God or something.
Wow.
Because it was just like, it looked like a donut. It was like black.
Yeah.
This like fiery ring around it, but very blurry. So it almost looked like a cell or something, like in your body, like, because it was so blurry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody was super excited, and like, for me, it was just really like, I don't know, somehow very spiritual. I don't know, I really liked it.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I think as things progress, like what you just talked about wouldn't have been possible, you know, 10 years ago, I'm guessing, because what's happening with technology is there's this kind of blurring between science and mysticism and spirituality. I think more and more, you know, there used to be this more kind of like either you're a scientist, you know,
yeah,
you know, and then the people that were religious like, that's just a bunch of bunk, you know.
yeah.
But I think what's happening more and more as this kind of evolves is that there's people that are deeply spiritual and deeply into science, and that they're, I think, least what I would hope and what I feel like is that we don't need to exclude one or the other, that somehow there's this, mixing or enfolding of all these things. My gesso, I mean, the other day I was mixing gesso, which crushed marble, with liquid hide glue, and then I was pouring in graphite, and I was like, is this alchemy?
Yeah.
Did I turn into a warlock at some point? You know,
Could be.
I know. I think, are we artists or priests? Are you a priestess or a shaman and I know those are big words, but in some ways.
What's the name for a female warlock?
A witch.
I think that's me.
Yeah.
I think my family would confirm that.
Yeah, get your witch on. My oldest daughter, she founded the witch house here in our city. And
Really?
Yeah, she did. Yeah. So, and it
off the old block, huh?
So I'm so glad to be able to do this with you, because I feel like the natural preset of our culture, like, you get a computer and its preferences are preset, right? And if you want to personalize it, you have to go in there and, kind of make it your own. And I have a guitar over there that came from the factory one way, but now it's totally like Rick Beerhorstized,
Good.
And I feel like our cultural preset is isolation. And that's just kind of and so to have something other than that, to have connectedness and community that's rich and potent, it takes a certain amount of intentionality. At least this is my experience. So to do this series of interviews is really my way to kind of swim upstream.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I'm not so into talking that much about myself or the work, but because I really like the work, I really go through pains to try to make the work speak for itself.
Sure.
But I'm very interested, I'm very interested in the process and what binds the work together, like, because it doesn't really look like it should be by one artist in a way, but there is a binding of the work just through the fact that they're all done with a similar process of taking a material and pretty much letting the material take a huge part in how it ends up looking, just on its own.
Yeah.
So that's kind of.
Can we back up a little bit to this thing about you not liking to talk? Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what is
very tricky. No.
What is that resistance, do you think?
I just think that there's a lot of it out there, and also like texts about work that I feel don't really add much.
Okay.
So in a way, I really just like to see people's take on it before I say anything.
Right. Yeah.
And then B, I think it should kind of speak for itself. I think that's kind of like my job.
Right. So it is, we as visual artists, we put so much energy into this visual language, right?
Yeah.
And in learning these processes and discovering processes really that are not, in a sense, audible. They're quiet.
Yeah. Or they're non-discursive.
Yeah.
That's why we have it, because there's things that need to be said that you can't say any other way.
Yeah.
And that's why we have like poetry or music or, what we do.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your process.
Yeah. So when I first moved to Germany, which was 15 years ago, I pretty much changed my process. I was working very minimal anyway in New York.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like you couldn't see anything on the canvas, but the very, very thin stripes of color on raw linen. And then I came here, and through an accident, I started working with bleach on raw linen.
What was the accident?
Um, It was I was making these projections. I was drawing from a projector.
Yeah.
So I had all my windows in my studio covered in cardboard.
Yeah.
And then after about like 6 months, I was done with that. And I took the cardboard down, and there were like exact impressions of the windows on the cardboard.
Yeah.
And I was just like really excited by it. And I thought, how can I do that?
So the sunlight had like bleached the cardboard?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I tried painting, you know, like with acrylic, really thin.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, well, it just like occurred to me, and I thought immediately, what a stupid idea. And so I didn't even try it for like 2 weeks. I was like, I can bleach it.
Oh.
You know, that's what the sun's doing.
Right.
And I was stupid, and so I didn't pursue it. And then I just thought, I'm just going to try one. I'm sure it won't work, but I'm just going to try it.
Yeah.
And I tried this one, just like a window shape, almost like a parallelogram, painted with bleach on raw canvas, and it looked beautiful.
So this raw canvas, like it made it so it made it more white. So it's sort of like a beige and then a white. Oh wow.
Exactly.
So
And
still subtle.
Depending on, not really.
No. Okay.
Because, you know, when you think about raw linen, it's like pretty dark. You know?
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, you're okay. Linen, not canvas, then.
No, like, you know, linen.
Yes. Okay, I see.
So it's pretty dark brown.
Yeah.
And depending how long you leave it on there, you get different tones.
Uh-huh.
So I just took off from there. I dragged canvases out in the garden and was spraying bleach, like with trees being the block out. So I was getting like leaves and things.
Yeah.
Then I started making like more architectural paintings with them, just like legs of chairs and stuff.
Yeah.
Or with shadows. And I did that, you know, for 5 years or so. And then I started working with other materials, bleaching them.
Okay.
And I tried red velvet, bleaching red velvet.
Yeah.
And I got some really, because the red velvet I bought at IKEA, which was already very tightly packaged.
Okay.
So it had already these really definite folds in a grid pattern on it.
Yeah.
And I just like bleached it with spray and rinsed it. You have to rinse it. That's another thing. Like that stops the bleaching process.
Right. Okay.
A little bit like photography.
The bleach would eventually eat right through the threads, wouldn't it?
Eventually, I guess, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it would just keep making it wider and wider and wider.
Yeah.
And I wanted it.
Wow.
So I had the stretching on the stretcher to play with. And then I had the color I could change. And that was about it.
Okay.
And then
it's interesting because painters generally are, you know, putting on layers of paint, and your process is more subtraction.
Yeah.
And
I like sculpture in one.
And something that I've been doing for years and years that relates is that I sand and scrape. It happened by accident too, where I was gonna paint over a painting I just thought was a dud, and I didn't want to waste waste it, and I thought I could make a new painting on it. So I was really vigorously sanding it down. And then, God, it was like, oh my God. And then I wiped it clean with turpentine, and it was just, oh my Lord, it was like something really magical had happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So the best things happen that way, right?
yeah,
I mean, that's
it's
how
not trying to do something, something breaks in on its own, which,
we just have to be open to it, you know.
yeah,
That's our job, to just be open to it and notice it and pursue it if it's exciting. Don't be afraid to be open and just be like, oh yeah, okay, why didn't I think of that?
right, right. And so many cool things have been, I mean, that's how breakfast cereal, Kellogg, I think it was Kellogg's, he was making some kind of gruel and it spilled on a hot skillet, and it made these flakes. And he made some more, and it was like, huh, you know. And the microwave, his chocolate bar melted in his pocket. He was working on an advancing radar, and his chocolate bar he was going to have for dessert after lunch melted in his pocket. And he was like, "What the heck?" And I don't know, for some reason obviously I know a number of these stories. I've collected them because I think it says something important. Like what you're saying to what I hear you saying is noticing, being willing to be redirected.
Yeah.
And I think there's another, maybe a piece of, sometimes like we're gifted in a sense. I don't mean I'm especially, but I mean like something is given to you, you
Yeah.
know. And the sad thing is sometimes maybe we don't recognize it because we're in too much of a hurry or we're too disappointed. Doggone it, this isn't what I wanted.
We're too much on our own track of how we think things should go, you know.
Yeah,
So
I do know.
the older I get, the more I let go of that, hopefully.
I do think that's, it's funny. Before you said the older thing, I was kind of thinking that I think this is something. I don't think it's a guarantee that it comes with age, but I think it can come with age.
It can, yeah. Yeah, so then I just pursued that, and then I used other color velvet,
Okay.
like that one there, that green, kind of dark green, which
Yeah.
it came out kind of like landscapes,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and also dark blue velvet, also landscapes, and then I I wanted to still use the velvet. I wanted to explore like it's always like I find some material that I really like, and what can I do with it, or how can what's in there, that needs to come out.
Yeah.
And so then I started working with this white velvet, and actually for the first time in many years, actually putting something on instead of taking it out.
Oh, okay.
So started working with this type of material that would still leave the velvet soft, like wouldn't make it, how paint would normally make it kind of hard to be
Sure.
painted on velvet.
Yeah.
So it still leaves it soft, and it's very runny. So the velvet soaks it up into its little veins of, material,
Yeah.
and it makes it like bloom almost.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so those turned out to be landscapes. Really, I just wanted to do like one stroke
Yeah.
across just one stroke red, let it dry overnight. One stroke blue,
Yeah.
like that. And then they started being, and I did that first in the middle of the page, and then like I thought, oh well, God, it's starting to look like trees and stuff. Like if I did it at the bottom, maybe it would be a landscape.
Yeah.
And so I did many of those now. I'm still working on making a little bit bigger ones now.
Okay.
And It's fun.
You know, it's interesting about your work, I think, is that as you're talking about it, it's like you have a special relationship with the materials. It's almost like the materials are as much a part of this as you are. It's like a
Yeah,
collaboration, the way you talk about it.
yeah, more there. Like if I am at an exhibition or something and people are like, "Oh, well, this is amazing what you did," or this is great," or whatever. And I even say like, "Well, I feel like I'm almost just like a person who goes through the motions. Like there's something out there making them. No, I just put them out there and I really like them, but it's not like they're mine or anything."
Right. You know, like anybody you would want to call to mind who's maybe had these special, masterful gifts, you know, but even them, like, you know, Van Gogh really, I mean, he was just so in love with the paint and his sort of love affair with nature and being outside. And then, you know, Da Vinci, his father was a notary, and they had reams of paper around which nobody else had. I mean, that was like paper was like gold bullion at that time, and because of the oddness of his father having this resource, he just drew the shit out of everything, and this thing happened. So he was just a curious kid that got old, you know, that
Yeah.
is certain drive. So I kind of feel like one, we romanticize these figures way out of proportion, that they were all kind of numbskulls, just like you and me, that just didn't stop.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to people definitely that have said what I just tried to verbalize. And I think it's just how most artists think about it, is that they're there to do it
Yeah,
and you kind of wait for inspiration, and when it comes, then it's your job to kind of do it.
yeah,
But it's not like it's a big like they're mine or something like that.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's a good place to be too, honestly, because then you're not taking yourself too seriously. Then you're not like Atlas, you know, with a world on your shoulders. It's more like, you know, it's like we're not that different from the security guard that's showing up at the booth. You know, it's like
Yeah.
we show up and we do the peculiar things that are interesting to us, and hopefully, you know, at some point we get to deliver the mail to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully we're mirroring something in our own time. I hope.
What do you mean?
I
What are
just
you
hope
talking?
like somehow we're representing our time on the planet,
Okay. What
in
does that
some,
mean?
in some way that we can somehow show what it was like to live when we lived in a different way, in
All right.
a unique perspective on that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, artist as observer, artist as
Well, just not really anything like literal or anything, but I just think, when you look at most things, you can kind of tell like maybe what was going on in that person's life or
yeah,
around him or what was in the air, when Schlemmer painted, you
yeah,
know. It's
yeah,
like it's
right.
pretty different, right?
Yeah,
Like
which then makes art, you know, spending time with art, like in a museum. You've got great museums in Berlin. A little bit like time travel,
yeah,
right?
sure.
You're drifting from room to room, era to era, different things that were, you know, up in upheaval and being discovered and struggled through. I'm reminded that the story didn't begin with me. You know, that I'm in some kind of river. I'm this continuum of my father and my grand and my mother and all these people that have contributed to the weirdness that is before you now on the screen. And I think that taking time to dig into that a little bit, I should say for me right now, that's helpful. It gives me a bit some ballast, in the hold of my ship. But then I have to remind myself, why in the fuck am I doing this? Why?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to come up with a good reason.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Well, I think the reason for me is is making what I'm calling an immigrant circle, because my ancestor walked out of Germany to the Netherlands. My dad took a steamship across the Atlantic in '48, and now I'm flying back over to Germany, and that's one just one layer of it.
Yeah.
So who am I is the question, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I think that's a question we need to keep asking ourselves. Who's Sarah? You know?
Yeah, I think that's, I guess, why people try to express in this way that doesn't involve words, because it goes to those places where we're not so sure what it is, what it means, what's there. I mean,
As you sink into the peculiarity of your work, I mean, you have some kind of odd love affair with fabric and and velvet. And like that's odd. I mean, not a bad odd, but it's an interesting odd. It speaks to who you are, you know?
I guess so. Yeah, I haven't analyzed it. I just go for, what attracts me, and I like the removing idea. For me, that was the most important facet of it. I mean, it's not over yet. I think I'm still going to work on bleach works,
Yeah.
but it's been pretty interesting, yeah, working with it. And whenever you start with a new material, it's always like, okay, great, but what do I paint?
Okay.
Especially if the material or the process is so prevalent, so much a part of the piece. Well, what's the image going to be?
You think
That's
about that.
Well, yeah, I have to, because, just like you do, I mean, you're putting brush to canvas, it has to be something, whether it's a stroke,
Yeah.
and then if it is a stroke, what kind of stroke? A
You know
short
what
one?
though? Here's another thing. As we get older,
Yeah.
we are, and I'm feeling less pressure to create an image, and I'm also experimenting more with repetition, like repeating either other people's images or repeating my image. I think of how many fucking times did Chuck Berry get up and play Johnny B. Good? His whole fucking career, he played that song over and over and over. So maybe that's not a great example, but you know, musicians cover songs, and if they have a beautiful song like Let It Be, they will play it many, many times because they know there's something special about that song. And I'm starting to repeat myself and finding a certain freedom in it,
Yeah.
like because it is about the process, and every time I do it, depending on, because I can't help myself, because I'm going to do it differently, because I because I'm an experimenter.
Yeah.
I need a launching off point.
Right, but you do have to decide
Yes.
before
Yeah.
you before you put brush to canvas, like, okay, what's this one going to be? And yeah, I also, life is so short. It's like, oh, what about that idea? I never really played that one out.
Yeah, I
Like,
know.
I'm going to try that one. I'm going to develop that more.
Yeah.
Like with the red velvet, I did that like 4 years or something before. I just did one, and I just kind of put it aside.
Right.
And then I was going to be in a group show, and I thought, oh, I could work on some more red velvet ones. Maybe that could be interesting.
Yeah.
And then like it just took off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
got
so
real
cool.
interested in it. So
Yeah.
there's fertile ground.
Yes. I want to, I want to embrace getting old, but I want to stay curious and playful like a child,
Mhm.
and I see that in you and I see that in your work, and I really admire that. And it's one of the reasons why I want to stay connected with you. I wanted to do this interview because I really respect what you're doing. I'm inspired by things you've said on the interview, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Well, thank you for inviting
Yeah. You're welcome.
me.